Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here, you there, hoping you're having a wonderful day. Well, I shouldn't say that, not to sound mean or anything, but I don't, I hope everything's going your way today. But what I really hope is that even if it's not, I hope that you are able to meet the difficulty that you might be experiencing today with acceptance, with presence, with some curiosity, because curiosity is the opposite of judgment. And in curiosity, we can learn and we can grow through what we go through. And most of all, I hope that whatever it is that you're experiencing today, whether that's something really beautiful and exciting and pleasurable, or something very difficult and weighty and hard and unpleasant and uncomfortable, I hope that you're meeting it with self-compassion. Okay, because that's the answer. It's always the answer is awareness and self-compassion, or awareness and compassion. It's always the answer. I promise you, it's always the answer. So today I want to do something a little differently on this first segment. I'm going to read to you a story from this book called the Tao of Pooh. It's a fantastic book. It's about Winnie the Pooh. For all of you who are not on the YouTube listening on the podcast, it's not Pooh as in poop. It's Pooh as in Winnie the Pooh, Pooh. It's actually a very famous book written, I don't know how long ago it was written. By the way, you're going to get to see me with my crooked glasses on today because because I got to read. It was written in 1982, and it's a fantastic book. It's actually there's an inscription in here from December 16th, 1988. Now, there's not many things that I own from 1988, but this book is one of them. You can see how it's like falling apart. I'm being very, very delicate with it. So anyway, we'll talk about this story after I read it to you, okay? But from the Dao of Poo, this is the story, a Chinese story of the Stonecutter. There once was a stonecutter who was dissatisfied with himself and with his position in life. One day he passed a wealthy merchant's house and through the open gateway saw many fine possessions and important visitors. How powerful this merchant must be, thought the stonecutter. He became very envious and wished that he could be like the merchant. Then he would no longer have to live the life of a mere stonecutter. To his great surprise, he suddenly became the merchant, enjoying more luxuries and power than he had ever dreamed of, envied and detested by those less wealthy than himself. But soon a high official passed by, carried in a sedan chair, accompanied by attendants and escorted by soldiers beating gongs. Everyone, no matter how wealthy, had to bow low before the procession. How powerful that official is, he thought. I wish that I could be a high official. Then he became the high official, carried everywhere in his embroidered sedan chair, feared and hated by people all around, who had to bow down before him as he passed. It was a hot summer day, and the official felt very uncomfortable in the sticky sedan chair. He looked up at the sun. It shone proudly in the sky, unaffected by his presence. How powerful the sun is, he thought. I wish that I could be the sun. Then he became the sun, shining fiercely down on everyone, scorching the fields, cursed by the farmers and laborers. But a huge black cloud moved between him and the earth, so that his light could no longer shine on everything below. How powerful that storm cloud is, he thought. I wish that I could be a cloud. Then he became the cloud, flooding the fields and villages, shouted at by everyone. But soon he found that he was being pushed away by some great force and realized that it was the wind. How powerful it is, he thought. I wish that I could be the wind. Then he became the wind, blowing tiles off the roofs of houses, uprooting trees, hated and feared by all below him. But after a while he ran up against something that would not move, no matter how forcefully he blew against it. A huge, towering stone. How powerful that stone is, he thought. I wish that I could be a stone. Then he became the stone, more powerful than anything else on earth. But as he stood there, he heard the sound of a hammer pounding a chisel into the solid rock, and he felt himself being changed. What could be more powerful than I, the stone, he thought. He looked down and saw, far below him, the figure of a stonecutter. My dear friend Colleen Dunn gave me this book in 1988 when we were in college together, and I was leaving college and we were separating. We just had a really great friendship, and she inscribed that to me, and it was like it was the most important lesson I'd ever learned in my life, and I forgot about it. It kind of I lost it, but yet there it was. It was like a beacon out there in the dark. That since 1988, there's been this draw for me towards my inner nature. And I'm just so happy to tell you right now that I'm finally there. I'm finally accepting myself for who I've always been. And I've stopped trying to become something that I am not. Okay, because in all of the lessons that I teach on this podcast and YouTube channel, of all the different things that I talk about here, right? This warrants a sip of water. A little drum roll, please. But of all the things that I talk about here, right, the most important, the most vitally powerful truth that I could ever know, that I could ever impart upon you, is that it's not about becoming something that you're not. Because the truth is that there'll always be somebody more powerful. There'll always be something or some force that's more powerful, more, rich or more funny or more attractive or more skinny or more muscular or more, whatever. There's always going to be something out there that's more than what you feel you have. And it's in that feeling that we have to become something else, that we have to strive towards something. That's where the suffering comes from. That's it right there. It's not, the suffering does not come from being who you are. The suffering doesn't come from not getting what you want. The suffering comes from the wanting in the first place. And the strongest lesson that I could possibly ever teach you is that the answer is to fully accept yourself for exactly who you are. Now, here's the thing, right? I can almost hear it. I can hear some people out there. I can hear you talking. I can hear it. And I hear you saying, wait a minute, is art telling me that I can't have ambition? Is art telling me that I can never become something that I'm not already? That sounds odd. That doesn't sound like art somehow. Well, let me be very, very clear with you. That is absolutely not what art is saying right now. Okay? In fact, as I just told you, since 1988, I've been losing this lesson, and I've been trying to become. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what this is and how this happens. But right now, I'm telling you, for 35 years almost, right? 1988, 98, it's almost 33 years or something like that, right? For all that time, I was searching to come back to who I was, or I didn't realize that that's what I needed. But it was, and like I tell you all the time here, right? Like from 10 years ago, you would not recognize me from all of the growth, all of the improvement, all of the change that I've gone through. But the reason I've gone through all that change, the reason I've experienced that growth, the reason that I've been able to heal is because I accepted myself for exactly what I was. Once I let go of that idea that I have to be something else in order to be accepted, in order to be loved, in order to be happy, in order to be, successful, whatever that thing is that was clouding my mind, that's what it does. It clouds your mind. It makes it impossible for you to see what really matters. And that thing that really matters is coming back to your inner being, your inner nature, your authenticity. That's all you got to do. That's all you owe to this world is what you are. And the beautiful gifts that you have to give from that place of who you are. Even if that is completely, unwell in this moment, right? Your health, again, you are not required to stay in a place of unwellness. If you accept who you are and what is making you unwell, that is the pathway to changing that thing. And it's not about becoming something else. It's about you transforming yourself back to who you really are. And that's when stuff really starts to make just really big changes start to happen. But again, it's not changing into something. It's never losing your ness, who you are. Just like they say, Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful writing on this. Maybe I'll share this one in another episode. That he says that when if you're in a dark room and you turn on a light, the darkness doesn't change into light, right? Or the darkness doesn't go away. The darkness is still there. It's transformed by the light. The darkness doesn't seek to become the light. The darkness allows that transformation to happen. I hope that's not too confusing. We'll talk about that in another episode. But in the next segment, I'm going to tell you about why it is that we have this struggle. So many of us have this struggle with our own authenticity. I just want to check my notes here and make sure that there wasn't anything else. Oh, yeah. The other thing is that, it's the same way, that it's not about becoming something else to achieve your happiness. It's also not about getting something else to achieve your happiness, right? The happiness that you're entitled to is inside you already. Just as everything else you could possibly ever need is inside you already. And that's the nature of this work, right? This work is not like going to a Tony Robbins weekend where everybody gets supercharged and we're going to make all these changes. We're going to bring some knowledge into us. We're going to, maybe take some herbal supplements or something like that and become this powerhouse of a person, right? This work is not that. This work is the opposite of that. This work is about peeling away the onion. It's about uncovering you. And when we can accept, right? Because the thing is also that when we accept ourselves for exactly how we are, that allows us to accept the circumstances around us for exactly what they are. And as we continue to allow this acceptance to happen, that's the awareness, right? The awareness starts to envelop everything around us and within us. And ultimately, we find that place where we're trying to be something that we're not. And that is what we can identify ultimately as the source of our suffering. It happens internally. And it's not easy. Okay, it's not. It's very, very simple, but it's not easy. It takes work. It takes practice. And if you're willing to put in the practice, 15 minutes a day, 20 tops, you can realize this in a very much shorter period of time than you probably think. Much shorter than I ever thought it would take. And I'm here to help you if you need it. Okay, I can teach you the practices. I can coach you along. I can guide you. I can hold your hand. And I can carry you when you need me to carry you. But this transformation is available to you. All you got to do is sit still and close your eyes and come back inside. And let go of all the thoughts and the emotions. They're saying, oh, you got to be this, you got to do that, you got to get that, you got to come there, you got to go there. And that's all what's making us less happy. It is not the route to our happiness. All right, so we're going to talk about a little brain science in a few minutes. I'll be back in a second. To the second segment, I actually had to check and see that I hadn't covered this before, because this happens a lot, actually. Pardon me, I just made this delicious tea. I want to get one sip before it cools off while I'm recording my segment here. But yeah, a lot of times what happens is like because I'm also recording in TikTok and Instagram, and so sometimes I get my wires crossed. Did I do this segment already? And so I go back and I look and I give myself like on the podcast app, they give you like say 10 days of episodes. So if it didn't repeat within 10 days, it's free games. Fair game. So I might have talked about this recently, but I'm going to talk about it again because this is really, really one of the most important things that any of us could understand, right? And especially for those of us who have experienced trauma in our lives, right? Especially as children. As you know, I've made no, mystery about this. I've been completely open about it, about some of the trauma that I've experienced in my childhood. So take this as a trigger warning, okay? I'm not going to talk about anything specific, but I'm going to talk about a very, very, sort of primal aspect of what happens in trauma. So if you're not comfortable with this, stop the video, stop the podcast, okay? Send me a message and I'll tell you what I was going to tell you without telling you that thing. And we can get into a personal conversation if we have to, okay? But stop because I don't want you to get triggered, okay, if you're feeling uncomfortable. Because this is actually something that's very valuable even for people who have not experienced childhood trauma. It's valuable for you to know and understand because, well, frankly, maybe there's somebody else in your life who has experienced trauma, right? And it's good for you to understand this so that maybe you could communicate a little bit more effectively. You can maybe be a little bit more, kind and compassionate and tolerant of someone else who's experiencing this thing that we're going through. Okay. So as I've mentioned a few times recently, I'm in the middle of a course, a 6-week course with Dr. Gabor Mate. It's like all of my favorites. I've done a course with Jack Cornfield. I'm doing a course now with Dan Siegel. I got a course now with Gabor Mate. Hey, Richie Davidson, if you're out there, you want to do a 6-week course, I'm your guy. You too, Barbara Friedrichsen. Anytime you're ready. Kristen Neff, you out there? It's like all of my heroes, I'm getting to read what they've written and it's just beautiful. Anyway, I shouldn't call Kristen Neff's bluff because she does have a course that I could take, but it's like I could teach that course, so it's not something I necessarily need to take. But anyway, the courses that I'm taking are more about like sort of the science behind what's going on here, right? And so Gabor Mate in our class the other day, and it's a pre-recorded class I'm taking with all of these people. I mean, there is a live call in many of them, but it's not like I'm going to a university or something. I'm sitting right here in this chair taking the course. So, and it is mostly pre-recorded with like live calls, which is cool. But anyway, one of the things that Dr. Mate was talking about the other day is that, so in our lives, and this is from the time where we are very, very young, but it never stops, right? A lot of times we think of these things as childhood issues, but they start in childhood, but they never really go away, right? There's something that you need throughout your lifespan, okay? And there are two things that Dr. Mate talks about in terms of these biological imperatives. Now, he's not the only person who talks about it. He's just the latest person, right? Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this. I've heard Dr. Stephen Porges talk about this. I've heard, so many different people talk about this aspect of our lives, right? And there are two very specific biological compulsions biological imperatives that we have, right, that we must adhere to. But these biological imperatives oftentimes, even without true trauma, but certainly with trauma, they are at odds with one another. And we're forced with a choice to give up one or the other. And unfortunately, the one we usually give up, because it's the one that like kind of necessarily has to be, it's really, really it's really difficult. Okay, so the two biological imperatives I'm talking about here, the first is attachment, and the second is authenticity. Okay. Now, attachment is not in the sense of Buddhism, right? I was actually just in a call with one of my clients, and he's a big fan of Eckhart Tolle and kind of studying some of that kind of stuff. And of course, in Buddhism, and Eckhart Tolle and many, many teachers in this work will tell you that attachment is something we don't want, right? Like that's what we have to let go of, the attachments, right? And of course they're talking about the attachment to the ego, the attachment to the concepts, the attachment to, the identification of our, of whatever it is that we think we need or want or need to be, right? And so it's not that attachment that I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about attachment from the clinical standpoint, right? Which is, psychologically, right? Which means is what they refer to in psychology as the attachment style, right? Now, when you're a baby, right, there's a way that your parents attach to you, right? They are either very attuned, they are very available, they're very sort of nurturing and attached to you, or maybe they're a little ambiguously attached to you, or maybe there's an avoidance attachment style, right? There's other styles, but those are the three that I'm talking about now, I guess, right? But the idea, though, is that, that attachment is something that we need, right? And I want to make sure that you're very, very clear on this, okay? There's been experiments of questionable ethics for sure, but experiments that were done, I think I've talked about this here before, experiments that were done with monkeys, newborn monkeys, who they placed in like an ICU container, right? Put the heat lamps on, gave it a blanket, had all the food it needed, had all the liquids it needed, had all the medication if necessary. It was completely protected in every way of their health. Right? They made sure that this thing had every life-sustaining nutrition that it needed. But it was never touched. Nobody ever picked the monkey up from the minute it was born until it died just a few days later. No medical reason for it dying. It simply gave up the will to live. Because a mammal cannot live without some kind of connection. And this is something that happens throughout our lifespan. Now, here's the thing. In some cases, especially with avoidant attachment style with parents, sometimes and this is something where I fall into, we feel like we don't need others, right? I'm okay on my own. That is not a sign of health. Okay, I can promise you that from personal experience, that is not a sign of health, right? So we need this attachment, right? And it starts with our parents as caregivers, but it happens throughout our lifespan that we need to be connected to other people. It's a biological imperative, okay? That means that every cell in our body is driving us towards this. In fact, Stephen Porges, who's the author of the polyvagal theory, he actually calls the sort of what we might call the rest and digest state of our nervous system, which is basically the baseline state. He calls that the social engagement state of our nervous system. Because that's how important it is, right? That we are here to connect to each other. The problem is, and again, especially when there's trauma involved or some kind of neglect or abuse on the parent or the part of the parents, but even in school, even in, it happens throughout our lives, right? Where we're trying to gain this attachment with someone, but we feel that who we are, and this is what comes from abuse, right? Like when this person who is supposed to love you beyond anything, unconditionally, and they're beating you, right? That tells you that something's wrong with who you are. So that means that second biological imperative, the authenticity, you being you, cannot happen. It cannot coexist with the attachment. Now, again, this starts with our parents, and our parents are the ones who are supposed to teach us how to connect, how to be genuine and connect with others, right? It's for all your parents out there. This is the thing. Even Dr. Mate says it's no more complicated than just allowing your children to be who they are and loving them for exactly who they are. Do that, And all the parenting books don't mean anything. That's the biggest thing. That's the most important thing. And that's all there is to raising healthy children. And most of us did not have that when we were kids. That's been seen, right? And so now we're left with this choice. But now what is authenticity, right? Authenticity is your inner nature. Like what I just wrote to you about, right? Your authenticity is the idea that you don't need to be someone else. There's only one you. And it's amazing that you're the one. And that's always been enough. And that authenticity, that's your gut instinct. Like Dr. Mate says, like imagine, 200,000 years ago, the earliest humans, right? They see a saber-toothed tiger and they sit there and they say, should I run? Does that tiger really look hungry? I don't know. I think maybe I should go get some opinions about this. I'm uncomfortable making this decision on my own. If you did that 200,000 years ago, you were lunch. No question about it. So your gut instinct said, tiger, run. And that's how we survived. That's the only reason I'm here giving you this podcast right now. Is because of the authenticity, that intuition that our collective ancestors had hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's the reason why we're here communicating right now. Nothing else. I mean, there's a lot that's happened in between, but it's that authenticity that allowed for that survival. How many times have you found yourself in a situation where you're very unhappy with something? You look back and you say, there were signs. Like now I'm seeing hindsight's 2020, right? That's a cliche because we can always look back and say, oh, that's where I did wrong. That's where I did wrong. That's where I did wrong. Well, guess what? If you were truly connected to your instinct, to your gut instinct, you wouldn't have had those misses. You would have seen the signs. You would have been able to make those decisions in real time. And this is especially true of people who find themselves in abusive relationships, right? Anytime you hear somebody in an abusive relationship, you always hear that there was a time where they saw a sign they should have been able to get out, but they didn't. It's all part of that authenticity. But we broke that bond between our authenticity and our attachment. And we chose one over the other. And there's a choice we had to make, right? Like that was the only choice you could make when you were a child, because then it was more important to be attached with a tribe, a family. Like you needed them to take care of you. So being authentic at that time was not as important. But then you learned how to not be authentic. And that's why a guy like Benjamin Hoff writes a book like this. And all these other books. And Dr. Mate does a course. And Dan Siegel does a course. And hopefully Richie Davidson does a course too someday. But the idea is that that's what we're trying to get to, right? We're trying to come into, now again, as Dan Siegel talks about, right? It's all about integration. It's bilateral integration in our brain, vertical integration in our brain, and integrating our brain with our body. With the heart brain and the gut brain, right? And there's so much information that we can get from that. There's so much alignment that we can find in that space. But it's a connection for most of us that's been lost. And it can be repaired. It's not that it can't be repaired. I would never come on this podcast and say, too late, sucker. There's nothing you can do about it. I would never do that to you. If it was true, I just wouldn't discuss it. But it's certainly not true here. I've read stories in Jon Kabat-Zinn's books, and he's another one. John, if you're going to do a course, I'm in. He writes about a 92-year-old man who took up mindfulness at 92. And the final days of his life were beautiful and happy, finally. If that's all you get, that's all you get, but at least you got that, right? So, and I mean, most of us are probably not 92 years old. Most of us are probably in our 30s or 20s, but even if it's your 40s or your 50s, it's not too late. And every time you sit down and you find your breath in your body, and you allow yourself to pay attention, to become a conduit for the sensation of what's happening in your body, that's you reconnecting to your authentic self. So don't try to be, and this is something that Dr. Mate says too. Don't make it a project. Don't say, I gotta be authentic or else I'm screwing up, because that's going to get you into other problems. Just bring awareness to the lack of authenticity. That's all you got to do. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope this was good for you. It was really good for me. I feel much better. I hope you do too. Please reach out if there's any questions you have about this, or any concerns or comments, or anything you'd like to learn more, or certainly if you want to know some of the practices, get in touch with me. Okay, there's a link in the description. All right, everybody. I'll be back again tomorrow. Have a great day.